wanted to talk about the DC Universe. So we just had Supergirl come out in theaters, and unfortunately it's not performing too well. Now, I have some opinions on the movie, but before we go further into that aspect of the film, I wanted to comment and talk about what does this do for the future of the DC Universe. And I think right now there's a couple options that James Gunn, Peter Safran, and the crew at DC Studios and Warner Brothers have to really look into. One of those is, do they pivot? Now, James Gunn laid out this plan back in 2023 before the films that they had left over from the DCEU came out. At the time, they still had Shazam! Fury of the Gods, The Flash, Blue Beetle, and Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom still set to come out in theaters. They did kind of kneecap those films by announcing there would be a new DC Studios or a new DC Universe after those films came out, so they kind of hampered the box office draw for those films. People just kind of saw those films as dead on arrival. Why do I even bother with these movies when I know they're not going to go anywhere anyway? DC's in a particular position right now. One thing they need to do is decide if they're going to stay the course or if they're going to make some adjustments. Now, I will point back to the DC Extended Universe. This is what the issue with the DC Extended Universe, one of the main issues they had in the DCEU was pivoting when they had a failure. And I'm kind of in a similar situation. The first movie did decent enough that they felt like they could build a universe off of it, both with a Superman movie. We had Man of Steel. Man of Steel had some moderate success. Was overall, I mean, I know it had some mixed reception from fans and critics. Upon kind of looking back on that movie, it's definitely had a much higher appraisal than it used to. But, I mean, I've always loved Man of Steel. It's always been a film that I've really resonated with. It was pretty successful at the box office, and so they felt that they could build a universe off of this. Warner Brothers thought they could chase that MCU magic, so they fast-tracked Batman vs. Superman. I don't think they should have done that, but this isn't really an examination on the DCEU. But the biggest mistake that they made was that when the film wasn't received the way they wanted it to, they quickly started changing up all their plans, kind of re-examining, do we keep on Zack Snyder? Of course, there was a whole stuff that happened with him with Justice League, the unfortunate passing of Zack Snyder's daughter, the studio using that as cover to get rid of him, then replace him with Joss Whedon, that whole mess. We know how that all went down. That is, in a sense, what kind of killed the DCEU 2 movies in and killed the DCEU because they weren't willing to stick with a plan. They didn't have a hard plan. They kept changing it. So the audience, the fans, never thought they could get invested with the series because of the constant changes, the doubt from the leadership. When the leadership has doubt over these projects, then why should us as fans get excited for where the direction of this universe is going to go? I thought at one point there was some hope with the hope of the Crisis on Infinite Earths that they were kind of building towards out of the Flash movie, but then the Flash was a pretty abysmal project. Now, I appreciate that film for what it is, but there was the whole Ezra Miller mess, the changing of the guard from Walter Hamada. At one point, Dwayne Johnson was trying to take over control, and then finally switched over to James Gunn and Peter Safran. Now, at first, I thought James Gunn and Peter Safran were going to finally put the DCEU on a positive direction, a positive course, but they decided to basically scrap everything except for what James Gunn worked on. Now, I have my issues with that. I think if you're going to restart a universe, reboot a universe, you really should do it from scratch. But he decided to keep the stuff that he had already done. There's reasons for that. Some of it's contract stuff, and then it's just the stuff that he worked on anyway. There's that, but with DCEU, you never knew what direction they were going to go in. The DC Universe, DC Studios cannot do this. If they start questioning themselves the second movie out, start questioning themselves, and then start pivoting so many times that us as the audience never knows what to get invested in or what to look forward to, then this universe is also, like the DCEU, kind of dead on arrival, and we're just going to see it whimper to its ultimate end in maybe another 10 years when they're going to have to do it all over again. Again, that's what the DCU definitely can't do. Another thing they really need to look at. So they can't do this pivot all over again. They can't keep changing it up on us. That's something they definitely can't do. Another thing they definitely need to look into is propping up the bigger characters. Now, Gunn's kind of doing this thing. We had Superman, but a lot of these early projects, you had Creature Commandos. Most of these characters, the audience, the wider DC audience, fans of this stuff, we're not even used to. We don't even know these characters. We're not familiar with these characters. So it's kind of hard for us to get excited and invested in a project that we don't really have any familiarity with. Now, Creature Commandos was pretty good overall, so I do have an excitement for season 2, but it's these obscure characters that James Gunn keeps pivoting back to. When you're building a universe, a DC universe, you have to have a mix of that. We had Superman, And Supergirl, I don't think, is a super obscure character, and in my opinion, actually was a good movie to go to next. But this year, what's the next movie we have? It's Clayface. We're not even getting a Batman movie in this universe before we're getting a Clayface. We're getting Clayface before Batman. We don't even have Wonder Woman established. We don't have characters like The Flash or Aquaman or Green Lantern. Now, Lanterns is coming out, so that's a good thing. But we don't have these bigger characters in the DC universe. We're going to be focusing on characters like the Creature Commandos, Supergirl, who's kind of both a derivative character, kind of a B-tier, C-list, C-tier character, and that's no knock on the character of Supergirl, and I actually really liked Millie Alcock's portrayal of the character. So this is not me knocking on the character of Supergirl, I'm just talking about the wider audience, the wider fan base here. Then you have these characters. James Gunn's talked about doing a Booster Gold series. At one point, The Authority was being talked about. These characters that the audience really, the larger audience isn't super familiar with, and I'm not saying you can't do projects like this. It can definitely work out. I mean, Guardians of the Galaxy, what James Gunn built his big comic book career off of, doing stuff like this, but it was built off of the success, the already existing success of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and that within that same year you had another tentpole MCU film in Captain America the Winter Soldier. So you had a big successful film like this, an established character. So Marvel Studios felt like they could roll the dice on some characters that the audience wasn't so familiar with. DC needs to get in that habit, and DC doesn't have the handicap that the MCU had of not being able to use all the characters, because at the time, Marvel Studios did not own all of the film rights. They didn't have the rights to the X-Men. The Spider-Man deal with Sony hadn't been made yet. Didn't have the rights to the Fantastic Four. Now they do, but at the time they didn't. So that forced them to kind of mix it up a little bit. DC doesn't have that handicap. They have access to all these characters. Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, the entire Justice League. They have access to all these characters. So what DC needs to do, in my opinion, is if you're going to do these obscure characters in that same year, you need to have another project with these bigger characters. So this year we had Supergirl, sure. The next film cannot be Clayface. The next film needs to be like Batman or Wonder Woman, or make the Green Lantern show a movie. That's what we need to do. Now, next year, thankfully, we have Man of Tomorrow. So there's another big film. And what I do like about this DC universe is it does overall feel pretty connected. We had Superman, then we went into Supergirl. Superman was in this movie. Then they leaned into the marketing on that and promoting this character, promoting Superman in this movie. I think we all knew he was just going to be like kind of a cameo appearance. So it's not this like buddy cop team up kind of film. So Superman's not like second billing on this. So it's not like another Superman movie. But DC doesn't have the setup right now, the structure of putting out a big tentpole character and then a smaller character and then another big tentpole character and then a smaller character. That's, I think, what they need to mix and match with, mix it up a little bit. Not saying that James Gunn can't do what he's doing with these more obscure characters, but he needs to mix it up some more with these bigger characters so that the audience who isn't familiar with these characters can at least get excited about all the stuff surrounding that. I mean, if this little project doesn't work out, projects that involve these more obscure characters, if that doesn't work out, that's okay. We've still got Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman. We have the Justice League. And that's also kind of the weird thing about this DC universe is it's not really establishing the Justice League just yet. I'm curious as to how that's all going to come about. The DC universe, DC Studios needs to look into maybe making some adjustments on their lineup every year. So, I mean, we have Supergirl already came out. Lanterns is coming out, which I am excited for. I love the Green Lantern character. I'm excited this is both a Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart project. So I'm excited for that. I wish it was a movie, not a show, but looking forward to that. But then we have Clayface. Again, that's the weird thing. Why are we not having a Batman movie before we get Clayface? It's kind of a weird thing. And they're going to have a lot of work cut out for them. They better hope that this movie is just one of the best film horror experiences ever, because if it's not and it's another mediocre experience, kind of like what Supergirl was, DC's in trouble. And they've already been in trouble, and they've been trying to dig themselves out of the hole they kind of dug themselves into with the mishandling of the DCEU. I love some of the projects in the DCEU, but that whole thing was just completely mishandled. You had actors constantly leaving, not sure if they're going to stick around. Okay, they're coming back. No, they're leaving again. So much the audience just doesn't know what to get excited for. The DCU cannot do that. So if they decide they're going to reboot again, I'm going to be honest, I'm not going to be excited for where the DC universe is going forward. I just hope whoever it is, if James Gunn doesn't stick around and they decide to get somebody else as the studio head, they better have a very clear vision of where they're going, what they're going to do. I'm not saying they need to know every single project they're going to be doing, but they need to know what Chapter 1, Chapter 2, and Chapter 3 are of this first book of the DC universe. And James Gunn says he's got, Chapter 1, Gods and Monsters, but we don't know what the full picture of this Chapter 1 looks like. Is Man of Tomorrow the end end of Chapter 1. There's a lot of other projects they've already announced that haven't even gone into production or were going to, and now they're not. So what's up with Batman the Brave and the Bold? What's up with the Swamp Thing film? Again, another obscure character that we're focusing on over some of these more popular characters. That's a very frustrating thing with the DC universe right now, and I'm hoping that this universe succeeds. I'm one of those people that I'm not a Gunn hater, not a Snyder hater. I'm just a fan of DC Comics, and I want this universe to succeed. Would I have liked to have seen more from the DCEU? Yes, I would have liked to have seen more of that. I would have loved to have seen Henry Cavill continue as Superman. But now we got David Cornsweet, who I love as this character. He's so good, very Christopher Reeve-esque, but has definitely made the character his own, especially when we saw more of him in Supergirl. Just solidifies that I love this guy as Superman, so I really want to see him continue on as the character. I'm so glad he gets another opportunity to do that in Man of Tomorrow next year. And I also really enjoyed Millie Alcock as Supergirl. I'm excited to see more of her, excited that she's going to be in Man of Tomorrow. So what I'm really hoping for is that I think they need to mix it up. And then the next thing they need to do is trust the process. Trust these characters that you set up. This kind of goes back to point 1, but point 3 is just trust these characters. Don't get, for a lack of a better term, gun shy of where you're taking the universe. Do you need to pivot in some aspects? Sure, but don't throw the entire thing out the window and start your plan over from scratch. Maybe tighten up the writing. I think with Supergirl, the weakest aspect of that movie was the writing. I would say get the writer of Supergirl off of the other projects that she's working on. She's currently working on the Wonder Woman script. I don't think she needs to stay on that project anymore, because I think Supergirl, from what I know, this was one of her first big things that she's worked on, and it's kind of a mistake. If this is your first big thing you're working on, I don't think it should be a blockbuster film. Let's test your writing skills out somewhere else on maybe an independent project. If you can prove yourself over there, then come over and do a big blockbuster. Especially don't do it on your second film out on a universe that you're trying to get the audience on board with, when the audience and the fan base is already divided over whether or not we should go back to the DCEU, whether or not we should stay with the DCU, or whether or not we should just abandon both entirely and start 100% completely from scratch. I think in the perfect world, starting over from scratch would have been best for the DCU, but that's not what happened. So let's stick with the DCU, establish some trust and some faith in the fan base. They got to get us fans really on board with where we're going in the DC universe. If we're ever going to get excited for this, we're going to get hyped for it, if it's ever going to get on the same level that the Marvel Cinematic Universe was, they need to do that for DC fans, because DC fans have had it kind of rough. It's been very up and down with DC fans. Marvel fans as of late haven't had it the greatest. Now the last couple of years have been a little better, but the Multiverse Saga, it was a little up and down, but nowhere near to what it has been for DC. I am hoping, as a huge DC fan, I love these characters. I'm just hoping for a universe, a cinematic universe. It's exciting. It's one that we can all get on board with, one that we can get excited for. That's what they got to look at with what to do going forward. So would I replace James Gunn? No, I want to see where he's going to take this universe. But there's some stuff that we do need to adjust. Not everything can feel like a Gunn project. Supergirl kind of feels like it was directed by James Gunn. Doesn't feel like it was directed by Craig Gillespie. So we need to be able to differentiate these projects, and that's something that they really need to address going forward. I have hope for the DC universe, but again, with the whole Warner Brothers Paramount possible merger, it's probably going to be happening. We're going to see where this is all going to go. I don't know if the Ellisons are going to want to keep Gunn on, if Gunn's going to want to stay on because of the Ellisons' leadership. We're just going to have to kind of, wait and see. And I hope that there's a bright spot for the future of the DC universe. Hey everyone, thanks so much for checking out that clip from my new podcast, Talking Movies and More. It will be intercut with the podcast we're doing called The Assembly Cut I'm doing with Hayden Smalley, and I hope you stick around and check out that podcast as well. Be sure to check it out here on YouTube or your favorite podcasting platform, either Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Go down in the comment section, let me know what you thought of the topic we discussed here today. Thank you so much for checking this video out. Remember to hit that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to get notified when new videos go live to this channel. When you do that, it always helps me out, and I greatly appreciate it. Hope you all have an awesome and a fantastic day, and I'll see you in the next video.